Hello and welcome to this Thursday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, Rishi Sunak, the UK Prime Minister, has axed the northern part of the HS2 line, which was to be built, over the next decade, including, the time that we're in now, as well as that. Republicans do begin their hunt for a new leader within the House of Representatives, a new speaker within the House of Representatives as a result of, the Republicans ousting their prior speaker of Kevin McCarthy. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we've also got lots to talk about on the charts, with oil being in a really interesting position after falling, dramatically yesterday, but as well as that, we've got lots happening on the economic calendar, lots of data coming out today, so lots is happening on the charts and on the economic calendar, but we'll come to that near the end. But first to talk about is Rishi Sunak. Now, Rishi Sunak axed the northern leg of HS2, the high-speed rail line to Manchester yesterday. So this would be the part between Birmingham and Manchester. We know, the UK's been kind of toying with the idea and investing and spending lots of money on HS2 and beginning building it, especially the part between London and Birmingham, which was seen as the most important. However, it was originally, planned, or at least, spoken about possibly extending all the way until Edinburgh. And now, it's planning on stopping only at Birmingham. So a dramatic change, and this all came at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, which we spoke about the other day, as he unveiled a series of radical policies to change Britain, including education reforms and a smoking crackdown. Now, Sunak justified this policy, saying the 36 billion could be saved as a result, using it for other investment into better value for road and rail and, bus projects. And this is kind of coming back to the idea around, whether just investing in this one high-speed rail actually solves the wide-ranging transportation issues around that northern area. And he's kind of changing the rhetoric from the Conservative Party from this idea that HS2 would help in solving that, in help solving the north-south divide. And he's now more so saying, well, it's such an expensive project to extend it to Manchester. Why don't we use that money for more cost-effective transportation means, such as, bus networks and other older network rails. Now, in terms of education, Sunak promised to introduce an advanced British standard of education in England, whereby, A levels would be merged with T levels into a single qualification. This is a large change to the, UK's education system, with the UK's education system traditionally, being, you're doing A levels, you're more so doing more academic subjects such as, economics, maths, English, and you'll usually take 3 or 4 of those A levels to apply to a university. Meanwhile, if you're less academic, you want to go down a more entrepreneurial or apprenticeship route. You might take a BTEC, which is another form of qualification, but it's more so in the trades or in more niche kind of areas. So maybe you just take a business BTEC, or maybe you take a fashion design BTEC, or a certain trade for your BTEC, and that's what it would traditionally be. Boris Johnson then changed that to T levels, which is more so like specialities that you would do, so kind of building on the BTEC side of trades and that sort of thing. And now Rishi Sunak's changing it to where these two things would be interlinked as a single qualification. Now, Sunak also announced the legal age for smoking would be raised by 1 year every single year. Thereby, a 14-year-old today would never be able to buy a cigarette, with restrictions on vape sales also being introduced. So this is a massive change, really, and a massive reform, for the UK's laws around smoking, because obviously this is basically an outright ban for the future of cigarettes. If you're making it so 14-year-olds can no longer, will never ever be able to buy cigarettes, then you are basically, outright banning cigarettes. You're banning smoking. So it's a massive change, really. Maybe it won't be felt, for the next 4 years, but certainly when that starts coming around, in 10 years, 20 years, this is a real long-term decision to be made. So it's kind of interesting to see how Rishi Sunak will play this, considering it's such a long-term kind of idea and project, stating. And he also said restrictions on vape sales were also to be introduced, which is a bit of a surprise, considering vape sales primarily serve to help people move away from smoking, which is more damaging, and therefore, move to a cleaner alternative, which hasn't got as, toxic, kind of fumes coming out the end of it. But that might just be the way it is. Maybe he just wants to ban all forms of nicotine, essentially. And now he was stating, we will be radical. Our mission is to fundamentally change the country. And this is what Rishi Sunak said at the conference, with lots of cheers in response. And overall, he presented himself in the 65-minute address as a change candidate. And this is kind of a interesting way to present yourself, especially considering he was in the government of the ex Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and the opposition Conservative Party leader to Liz Truss, who was the last Prime Minister before Rishi Sunak. And he's been in government for a long time, so it is interesting to see how he's now presenting himself as a change candidate, despite the Tories being in power for so long. And the Tories are 15 to 20 points behind Labour, and therefore the speech sought to force Labour to come up with its own policy responses, because currently the way it is with the Conservatives being in power for a significant period of time now, it has allowed Labour to kind of just basically attack the Conservatives' downsides in relation to their history of policy making, whereas Labour doesn't really have anything that they can kind of be attacked for in relation to their history, most recent history, and therefore Rishi Sunak's trying to change this by distancing himself from that history and creating a new way for himself, and kind of making it more about policy and different policy agendas, rather than the history of Conservative Party leadership versus what the Labour wants to do in change. But David Cameron responded to the HS2 news saying, many will look back at today's announcement and wonder how this once in a generation opportunity was lost. As we have to remember, David Cameron and George Osborne were massive leaders in pushing for HS2 and getting it implemented. Sunak announced a new Network North rail project, including a fully electrified line that incorporates a new station at Bradford, along with tram systems in Leeds and a host of road schemes. So he's kind of trying to propose a more cheap alternative for the North in relation to transport. But that's all for the article in relation to Rishi Sunak. Next to talk about really is the Republicans in the House of Representatives, as the Republicans begin hunt for new speaker to replace ousted McCarthy. And this is what we spoke about yesterday in relation to Matt Gaetz, the Florida Republican congressman who's a hardline Republican for Trump, did set up and propose a vote to remove McCarthy for kind of siding, or at least creating a more Democrat favoured bill, short-term temporary bill to keep the US government out of a shutdown. And this is kind of what he did. Now, Republicans on Capitol Hill began their search for a new leader on Wednesday after a historic rebellion by hardline party members unseated a House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Now, Jim Jordan was the first Republican lawmaker to enter the race, with him already being known as a loyal Trump ally. And these were the people, the really strong Trump allies were the people that kind of ousted McCarthy, as they kind of saw him, pandering to the Democrats too much, and essentially thought, this guy's kind of a traitor to the party. We probably need to do something about this. And this is kind of the situation the Republicans are now in as a result. The election for the next speaker is not expected until next week, with it having the potential of highlighting a Republican civil war. And this is all in, the lead up to basically next year's presidential election and the primaries. Now we're kind of experiencing US politics come to light and really get fiery again. The primaries aren't too far away, with them, taking place early next year. So we only have a few months until the primaries for, the US presidential election really starts. So things are really, firing up within the Republican Party, and having a civil war, and knowing that you've got a presidential election next year isn't very good for a party, obviously, and not good for the party leadership. Now, Jordan, however, did say that it was our time for our Republican conference to come together to keep our promises to Americans. So essentially, he's trying to get all the Republicans to unite and deliver the more hardline Republican kind of policies for Americans that he believes they want. Now, Scalise was, until this week, McCarthy's second in command and is popular with swathes of the Republican conference. But in August, he revealed he was being treated for for blood cancer, but he too, announced his bid for the leadership. So, we've got lots of people now weighing in already for the leadership as Speaker. Hardline Republicans such as Marjorie Taylor Greene also suggested that Trump should enter the race. However, as we've been talking about, Trump's already got the mountain of criminal proceedings that he's going through, in addition to trying to run for next year's president of the United States. So he's got a lot to deal with already. And Trump, however, on Wednesday did say that a lot of people had asked him to stand for Speaker, but his focus was totally on running for president. So it does seem that Trump doesn't want to take his eye off the ball. He's got a lot to deal with a lot of, criminal proceedings, and he also wants to become president again. So he's got to deal with a lot of things. So I doubt he's going to be running for a lower level position such as Speaker. And the situation is dire for Congress, as the lower chamber of Congress cannot deal with the legislative business until a Speaker is elected. So basically, Congress is in standstill. The Speaker, the House of Representatives can't do anything until they get a Speaker, and the Senate can't do anything until the House of Representatives get a Speaker, because they have to work together. And the President can't pass anything because bills can't pass if the House of Representatives can't function. So the whole government really, despite extending the budget, the whole government really can't function in the way that it's supposed to at the moment, and essentially it's paralysed. And that McCarthy did make it clear, however, in a press conference after his removal, that he would not run for Speaker again. However, he did not endorse a successor. But that's all for the articles, really. Next to talk about is the US 30 and is the charts, with firstly the US 30 reaching the fib extension. Now, we've been talking about the US 30 a lot recently, with US indices falling following the Fed's hawkish rhetoric in relation to raising rates later this year, and in addition to lots of strong economic growth kind of data coming out about the US, this has all kind of pushed the narrative which is down and bearish for US stocks and indices. And this is why we've kind of seen the fall off for US indices, which has now reached this Fibonacci extension after reaching and claiming liquidity around the 38.2% Fibonacci area on October the 1st, Friday 29th of September. So it does seem that US stocks are still bearish, but it'll be interesting to see, now that it's reached this area of Fibonacci extension, whether it will make a move back to the upside now and possibly retest other areas before moving lower, or just continue barreling lower from there. And that's a kind of image not so much represented on the Nasdaq, which has kind of been more bullish, surprisingly, in comparison to the US 500 and the US 30, with the S&P 500 also kind of dipping below, but seeing that retracement come about. So they're all in kind of similar situations of being in bearish positions, but some are performing better than others, such as the Nasdaq, and some are performing worse than usual, such as the US 30 or the Dow Jones. Now, dollar has declined after reaching highs, and we did talk about yesterday how it was kind of sitting around this area, and we were wondering whether it would reach this area of extension after, having rallied from the 50% Fibonacci mark. However, it does seem to have made a decline, breaking that bottom of the market there and declining. So it'll be interesting to see how far it will fall from here, or whether it's just going to continue going up from here. If we pull out the Fibonacci extension tool, it'll be interesting to see whether it can bounce off one of these areas. It has punctured the 38.2% area, and all the candles have actually stayed above, with the wicks only tapping it. So it'll be interesting to see whether it will now make a move again to the upside, or in fact it will come lower still. As for the euro, the euro's also seen a decline, but has seen that kind of retracement that's taken place yesterday, reaching now the 50% Fibonacci mark. We did talk about the 38.2 and the 61.8, but in fact it's gone right in the middle and hit the 50% and kind of declined from there. So it'd be interesting to see, with any data or any moves, whether euro will now make a further move to the south, to the downside, and continue on its bearish trajectory, which has been moving on for a very long time now. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, Bitcoin, we were kind of expecting it to possibly move back into this area of accumulation, with this maybe just being another false breakout. However, it does seem to have settled, or at least is pushing now above these prior highs and prior areas of accumulation. But obviously Bitcoin's a very volatile asset and has been moving very interestingly recently, where it's kind of created these areas of accumulation whilst having false breakouts to the down and upside, and now more recently it's kind of created this other area of accumulation around this area above the prior one. And so we kind of expected this to just be another false breakout. However, it is moving in a very interesting way. Now, it'll be interesting to see then whether it will stay above this trend line, this bullish trend line, and continue its upward trajectory. But next to talk about really is gold, which is accumulating at a certain level of liquidity. I did highlight this level, maybe a week back or so, when we were seeing this decline, because I did note that, there didn't seem to be many areas on the charts where the dollar or where the gold could find an area of liquidity to halt its massive fall to the downside, with this kind of being the only area that I was able to highlight, which was its prior lows before making this large rally, and after now reaching that area, as we spoke about yesterday, it has continued to wick into that area of liquidity, but not moving higher or lower, showing it's possibly accumulating lots of buys and sell orders at this certain level, as possibly we wait for more economic data to come out. It'll be interesting to see though whether we may make any moves to the upside for a retracement possibly, or just continue to make an area of accumulation around this area. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But finally, US oil has fallen dramatically, seeing its largest fall for a very long time now, and we were kind of talking about oil possibly reaching the $100 mark on Brent crude oil. However, it seems to have fallen off a cliff entirely, falling and losing these prior gains that were made following the supply cuts announcements by Russia and Saudi Arabia. And so it'll be interesting to see now how that will play into the effect of inflation, because people are kind of pricing in the idea of these higher oil prices driving up petrol prices, therefore creating a stronger level of inflation. So now we're seeing oil kind of fall off price wise unexpectedly. It will be interesting to see how this will shape up actual inflation figures, and then shape banks, central banks, economic and monetary policy. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and it'll be interesting to see how far oil will really fall until it finds some ground, some liquidity. We could start highlighting out some areas here of prior highs, prior areas of resistance, as we can see here, resistance, and then areas of accumulation around this area, support, resistance, support. So it'll be interesting, and now it's kind of coming into contact with that area. It'll be interesting to see whether this will be now used as an area of liquidity for the upside. But that's all for the charts. Next and lastly to talk about, obviously, is the economic calendar. We're not too much coming out today, but still some important things to note. With no high significant data coming out, only medium data, but obviously medium data still has its significance. Now, Aussie balance of trade data is coming out today, along with the German balance of trade, as well as French industrial production. So some European figures there obviously coming out. So keep your eye on that if you're trading the euro. And obviously Aussie data, balance of trade, obviously plays a large factor into the Aussie exchange rate. As well as that, we've got UK's manufacturing data, and we've been interested in seeing how European manufacturing markets have been shaping up in general, and especially for the UK, which is now having some issues around carbon taxes when exporting to the EU. So keep your eyes on that for the UK. As well as that, we've also got US balance of trade data and figures coming out, along with, and finally, the US initial jobless claims and continuing jobless claims. So this will be very important for shaping up the Fed's monetary policy outlook, because jobless claims make up a large part of kind of predictions for interest rates, because they make up a large part of how the economy is seen to be performing. So keep your eyes on that. And as well as that, we've obviously got a lot of these Fed officials doing their speeches today. So keep out and listen to those speeches. Listen out for any hawkish or dovish rhetoric, as this all plays into the markets. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital today. I hope you're having a great trading day. Have a great trading day at least. And enjoy this Thursday. See you later. Bye.